it's a draw. But these positions, they're much more difficult than the eval bar would make our audience believe.
And that's my fault. I take full responsibility. I made the rookie commentator mistake. I called that game way before it was over, but you just tend to trust Alireza's technique. He had 2 extra minutes, an extra exchange. Fabiano had blundered, and just the mental fortitude to refuse to give that game up, even though, yeah, it's the first game of the SEC, plenty of time on the clock. What SEC winners do is they make every game count for them. That was an excellent defensive effort by Mr. Caruana.
And now Firouzja, he's got the task of having the black pieces against a well-prepared Fabiano. We saw what happened to them in the last Champions Chess Tour event, where Fabi won that game in 9 moves, but that actually only motivated Firouzja. We heard him say that in the post-match interview, which Firouzja won, by the way. He said, well, I saw him laughing, and that just made me want to essentially crush him. And here in game 2, Firouzja actually, he needs to be careful, not even just because of the position, which I do believe is simply better for white. Black has pushed his H-pawn, whereas white is playing in the center. But when you don't win a position that you believe is completely winning and you just start getting mad at the world and your opponent and yourself, you can't have that happen to you this early in a match. It's just one game. It's still half-half. Danya Alireza, he has a solid setup right now, but I really do believe he must be careful. The black king still sits in the center.
Yeah, tilt comes in many different shapes and sizes. I think most people associate it with table slamming, playing H4 on the first move, and H5 on the second, and hanging your queen. But, it can also take on a much more subtle shape where you start making less and less objective decisions because your animal brain is telling you, I have to come back from that throw. I have to rebound. And when you try to force your will on the position, you get something like what Alireza has now, which is very, very dangerous. Now, bishop takes c5 is the big question, Robert. You take the pawn and secure the d6 square. What has Fabi cooked up? Is it f4 and e5, driving a second set of pawns on those dark squares? Or is it something more exciting? I think it's the latter.
Yeah, it's definitely more exciting. And he goes queen c1. That's not a move I was expecting. I thought pressure on d-file. And look at that. That's not your arrow. Black's only move to keep whatever the almost balance that black has is bishop d7. Are you kidding me? Giving up your rook on h6, allowing the queen to get into black's camp, and all you get is a knight and a pawn in return. That's a very difficult move to play, but it might be necessary.
And I have to show why. The reason why isn't as tactical as people might think. It's actually rather positional. What happens as we pull up an analysis board here, if black just slides the rook back to h8, you see the eval bar sliding all the way up, and it's because of this move, queen to c5. That is not a maneuver you get to carry out every day, Robert. Queen d1 to c5, hitting the bishop. Bishop has to stay on this diagonal, otherwise there's a fork. And now white does, in fact, drive the pawn down to e5. And just look at black's position. I mean, do I even need to say anything as this knight drops into d6? For example, a6, knight d6. This is just, black is toast here. Also because white's bishop is an absolute monster on g2. Its counterpart, I don't know the adjectives that I would use to describe it. Maybe French?
Well, Donna, can you try to castle for black here for a second? We should remind everybody.
Wait, well, why?
That's important for people at home, that the rook has already moved. It captured that bishop on h6. So even if white weren't just crushing, and if we go back to the live position, we can see that rook on h6 here, that you can move the rook back to h8, but that black king will never find shelter. So bishop d7, found by Alireza. A credit to him, and he is super strong. That's not up for debate, but to just calmly respond to a queen move hitting your rook with a developing move that attacks a loose white knight, I think this will be an electric game.
And this is a move you play through clenched teeth, not because you're happy to sacrifice an exchange, but because it's the only way out. And credits Alireza not only for finding the move, but just realizing that he needed to pause, because this was the last moment before the train would leave the station, as Fabiano tries to kind of get the best version of queen takes h6, as he kind of desperados the knight to ward this bishop off of the long diagonal. But has he overdone it, Robert? Does this actually harm his version of this position?
Maybe according to Stockfish, but to my eyes, he wants to play e5 at the right moment and just open up the bishop on g2. So the b7 pawn, of course, is hanging in the process, and black's king truly will be stuck in the center. But as soon as I say stuck, I'm thinking safe. A king on e7 with a queen on f6 in many of these positions will actually be nice and safe, tucked away in the middle of the board. So I still think white is better. I'm looking at the clock as well, but you have to be very careful here if you're Fabiano. The d4 pawn, that's a passer. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, both games leading to an exchange down position for one player. You said that Black King is stuck like a fish, should I say, stuck like a fish out of water. And the possibility of e5 is much scarier to a human than to a computer. What's scary about that is not only that the white's bishop opens up, but that, as you were pointing out, after bishop takes b7 happens, the other rook has to make a move. And then you don't even have the prospect of castling queenside. If you give black 2 moves in a row, I am absolutely, and queen f6 is on the board. If I had one more move, I am absolutely castling to the west and then going king b8. Is the king happy on b8? No, but it's a lot safer than it is on e8. So are you expecting e5 by Fabi, or is he going to try to set it up with a risky move like f4? Because that queen on h6, it ain't going to be happy about being imprisoned there.
No, bishop f8 comes to mind after f4. So rook to c1, rook a1 to c1, I should specify. It seems like the simple move. But then the downside is black plays e5 and just establishes himself in the center. e5 for Alireza. What do rooks need? Open files. I see an open c file. That looks good, but let's look at the squares along the c file. c5, c6, c7, c8, all firmly under black's control. And okay, this is a little bit too much, Danya. I know we like dynamic chess, and that's the blue arrow suggesting white's only move to keep the advantage is e5. It's also quite a logical move. Get that b7 pawn, open up some more lines for those rooks.
And g5 just seems to burn unnecessary bridges. I pointed out that the queen side is the only safe place, relatively safe place for black's king to go. Well, that changed after Fabi evacuated his queen. Now, the black king did have a path, a direct path to the g8 square, kind of canceling by hand. Now, you're kind of eliminating that possibility altogether. The king would no longer be safe on a square like f8 or g8 because white could blast open the king side at the right moment with f4. I am actually tempted by f2, f4 in this position, but we see the blue arrow. And between the orange arrow of the commentator and the blue arrow of the Silicon friend, I think I know who to trust.
I trust Fabiano. Yeah, Fabiano plays e5. And what's fascinating to me, Danya, he didn't take on b7 right away. So was he looking at some other move? I guess so. But he just takes, snaps the bishop right back. And now rook c1 has bishop c6 attached to it in some positions because a swap of those light square bishops will allow white to infiltrate the position. Double rooks take over key squares. And for Alireza, yeah, you could play pawn to h4, but what attack? You and what army? I see nothing there in the future for Alireza, especially considering his king now doesn't seem as safe in the center as it once could have.
And now the shoe is on the other foot in terms of the time situation. It's Alireza who drops below a minute. Much has been made of his ability with only a couple seconds on the clock. We all remember that absolutely epic comeback to win his CCT match against Jan Nepomniachtchi. If you haven't seen that or you don't know what I'm talking about, it's on the Chess.com YouTube channel. You have to see that. That is must-watch chess content for any self-respecting chess fan, Robert. I think you'll co-sign that point. But look at Fabi. H4, it's like pinching a dinosaur. What you doing, boy? If black plays h takes g3, white's going to recapture away from the center, as of course you're instructed to do. And then another file will open for white's other rook.
Yeah, this rook on c1 about to land on c5, just not anymore. Bishop d6 covers that square. But now it's time for Fabi to go on the offensive. I don't see what black is really doing. I would start with pawn to b3, just so I don't blunder that pawn in any position. And then moves like queen to a5, jumping into the black camp, come to mind. So Alireza does have his work cut out for him. Fabiano up in exchange for one pawn. But with the black king where it is, I think that Fabi should be happy with how things have gone.
But what is the purpose of rook fd1? He is inviting Alireza to push e5 and establish the pawn chain. Now, rook takes d4 was threatened. So Alireza, he checks off 2 boxes, gets his king to a safer spot. Now f2, f4. Earlier, I pointed out that possibility. It's no longer possible. That square is defended 8,000 times by black's pieces. And these dynamic positions, Robert, can turn around so quickly. Bishop c6, it no longer pins black's bishop. And Alireza just in time to preserve his bishop pair and perhaps full compensation for the pawn, for the exchange.
And king g7, rook h8, those ideas are definitely in the back of Alireza Firouzja's mind. He wants to go on the offensive. And you see Alireza's clock. He is in some serious time trouble right now. The engines, the evaluation bar may say it's about equal. But come on, with this kind of time, it's really difficult. But then again, we're talking about the bullet chess champion.
Ooh, watch out. Rook a6, bishop b5 is super important. And the rook is unable to stay on the 6th rank. Fabi missed that, and he has to drop down to c2. Otherwise, that ambulance, it would be coming for white's rook. I think king g7 is coming next, unless And maybe even if Fabi takes back with the F pawn, which perhaps he should, but he takes with the H pawn. And now keep an eye on that H file.
Okay, so the black king steps up. The rook is trying to go to h8 next. White does want to play king g2, rook h1, but I don't actually think you're getting there in time. So Fabi, he's thinking, trying to come up with a plan. Danya, he's down to nearly 30 seconds himself.
Yeah, the landscape of the position has changed completely. The momentum on Alireza's side, but with 5 seconds left, rook h8, rook h1. Do you see a tactic there for black? 2 seconds, and he goes rook c1 first.
Oh, Alireza's in time trouble, and he's in trouble with his king. As soon as you trade off the rooks, just like in the first game we're talking about, you don't have remaining pieces to help defend. Ooh, look at that full board awareness. A queen out to a6. Danya, where's the knockout?
Well, maybe there is no knockout. Maybe you just help yourself to the pawn with 0.5 seconds. Alireza barely getting his moves up. Now a check on h7 at the right moment could be strong. I would just go bishop d5. I wouldn't be looking for that knockout because Fabi's king is completely safe. Just push your a pawn, but don't blunder mate on f2.
Okay, so bishop c5. Wait, how do you stop that? That wasn't even
Queen
your
A8.
arrow. Oh, beautiful stuff. Forcing black into a pin. Danya, it looks like Fabi, he has everything under control now.
Chef's kiss. Queen back d for bishop c6. He blundered his queen.
Oh, commentator's curse. He just had everything under control if he put his bishop on e4 rather than the queen.
He's going to lose now. Queen f2 was threatened. He's down a full queen, and Alireza will pick this one up, I think. With 1 second left, I cannot believe that. That was the last hurdle. One more threat. And if he parried that threat, as he's still trying, by the way, he's still trying to coordinate some sort of a fortress, but it ain't happening, Robert, because Alireza is going to pick up these pawns. Oh, that was a heartbreaker this time for